Welcome to the Power of Kinship podcast. I am Randy Kay, and I'm delighted to have a very timely interview today with the very busy Dr. Tim Kearney, who is clinical psychologist at the Community Health Center and has a BA from Yale in psychology and Spanish literature. I hope that comes in handy today. Also a master's in theology, a PhD in clinical psychology, author of Caring for Sexually Abused Children, a handbook for families and churches, and of course, works very hard, and one of his focuses clinically is helping families impacted by medical illness and trauma. And I have to say that probably very much applies to a lot of what families are going through right now. Welcome, Tim. So nice of you to join me this morning.
Well, thank you for having me.
So this will be available as an audio podcast, but also obviously you can watch this on Zoom and watch me and Tim in our natural habitats just having a conversation. So Tim, a little about me. We were introduced by my dear friend, Marianne O'Hare, who does a lot of work with you. And so you don't know me that well, and I really appreciate your jumping in. I am a voiceover talent, an actor and broadcaster, speaker and author. A multi-potentialite is what they call us these days, and doing a great deal of work to help people with the power of kinship. That is my passion topic. And just as I was getting booked to speak at meetings and conventions about hugging and high-fiving and human touch and the power of improv and everything, suddenly we're all isolated in our homes. And so kinship continues, but in a very different way. I am also the best grandma ever, and many grandmas will say the same thing, but the inspiration for this is that I am helping my daughter, obviously very carefully and with precautions, my germ-free home to her germ-free home. I travel the 3 miles every day to help with her children, my adorable kids. They're all under 5. They're 4 and under. And what I've noticed is in them and in other people that I'm in touch with on Facebook, there's a lot out there for kids being homeschooled and, learning long division and doing school projects. I haven't seen a lot about preschoolers, about their emotions. I have seen things we're doing, keep them on a schedule, let them know what to expect, give them lots of love, and here are activities you can do. And I've never seen more uses for pipe cleaners, but people have told me that their preschoolers are having emotional reactions to this. And so I wanted to bring it to an expert. Grandmas are wise, but not that wise. And so I have a few questions for you, and then I want to end in our 20 minutes with where people can go for help. So my first question is, I know this is unprecedented. We've never had the entire world ideally in self-isolation, and some are at home, as we are lucky enough to have a backyard to break the monotony and to get outside for fresh air. Other people are in apartments and even without balconies and can't even do that. But my first question is, what effect do you think all these sudden changes, and it seems like every day there's a new one. No, now we can't go to the supermarket with you. Now we can't, hug our friends from across the street. Um, what are signs that you feel are normal to be expected in this unprecedented era? And then I'd like you to go on and talk about if there are any signs of true trauma that we should be looking for in preschoolers who cognitively can kind of get it, but not really. All they know is their life has changed.
Yeah, those are great questions. And I am, as you mentioned, a clinical psychologist, oversee a large statewide organization here in Connecticut. So I'm hearing stuff from my staff as well as my own direct experience with kids. So I'll draw on that a little bit. But let me start with two things just to keep in mind. One is that all of the parents, grandparents, and I have a 3-year-old grandchild as well,
Okay.
so I'm dealing with that a little bit personally as well. Parents, grandparents, you're all the experts on your own kids. So you know your kids inside out. And the other thing I'm going to say, and just like on the airplane, that whole thing you hear about the mask dropping, take care of yourself, because the single most powerful predictor of how well kids do in trauma is how well their parents and caregivers are doing and able to keep them stable, able to present them a world that's positive and forward-looking. So back to the issue of trauma. So hard to tell with preschoolers that basically The rule is anything that is exceptional from what you're used to seeing. Some kids, it's going to be too much of this. Some kids, it's going to be too little of that same thing. So you have to look at your own child and understand that. And understand that this right now is an extraordinary time, so that we are likely to see reactions that are extraordinary, and they may very well be normal reactions to an extraordinary situation. So don't jump to, oh no, something horrible, terrible is going on. Try to deal with the specific issue. If you have a child that's having trouble sleeping, maybe that's how they're reacting to the issues. Do the things that you know soothe them. Do the things that you know are going to help them to sleep from what's worked before. Try to keep as much normalcy, as much stability as you are able to do. And to the degree that they're able, I think Randy was saying, you know, kids don't understand this, how things are changing, how things are not changing. And to the degree that they're able to use words, which varies widely, as you note, from the same age to different age in terms of developmental stage, try to use the language that they're able to use. Try to deal with whatever fears they are able to express in the same ways you always would have dealt with fears, and take them seriously. You know, I have had my kids a little bit older, you know, you think of the older preschooler, the 5-year-old, who
Well,
somehow
yeah,
has
it's a
been,
big difference,
right,
in brain
you know,
development, obviously, from 4 to 5.
but
So
someone
yeah.
who's been exposed to older kids and maybe seen some things they haven't seen, that are worried about when are the zombies going to come, because their association with viruses, zombies. So what,
Wow.
you know, they saw the video game that their older kid was playing, or what their
Right.
brother or sister was playing, or whatever. So whatever fears that they're expressing, deal with them rationally, quietly, as well as you can. Keep as much of your regular schedule as you can, and keep future oriented. Talk about the summer will come. Uh, People, the little kids, again, the older they are, the more they understand this. They're worried about the people they can't see. They're worried about their grandparents. They're worried about relatives that they're not allowed to see anymore because you can't travel. Do as much Zoom contact. I love your focus on kinship, because that is so important. And I've been telling everybody I talk to, social isolation does not mean isolation.
Hmm.
Use the internet, use the phone, use whatever ways you can use to stay connected to the people that are important to you and to your children, because that is going to help them stay stable in the midst of it.
Thank you so much. These are excellent, excellent ideas. And I've spoken to a lot of fellow caregivers. I have friends, obviously, who are young moms and dads, as well as grandparents themselves. And for instance, somebody told me that well, I don't know, I think that babies, if they have mommy and daddy,
Yeah,
and
you're right.
they're fine.
That's
Um,
right.
One of my friends has a 2.5-year-old who looked up at her and said, "I hate my house." And so I'm, thinking, wow, she's never said that before. So that's, I like just your take on that. And again, these are all caring parents did the right
Well,
thing
of
and let
course,
her
of course,
express
of
their
course.
feelings. We were all channeling Mr. Rogers and looking for the helpers. Um,
That's the key, isn't it? Yeah.
and then I have a friend who has a 4-year-old, when given the opportunity to simply take a ride in the car, just to drive around, said, I don't want to leave my house. I'm scared to leave my house.
Hmm.
Do you feel like, again, unprecedented period in
Yeah.
history? Do you feel like these are, but P.S. the next day they were able to get in the car, and just
Of
driving
course.
around and sitting in their car seats was a huge thing, they told me. But do you feel like these are within these, obviously these are,
Yeah. No, those are normal. Those are extreme responses, but it's an extreme situation. So we should be expecting extreme responses. And I think in both cases, the little one who says, "I hate my house," you're limited as to language and cognitive skill with the 2.5, although
right.
there's a wide range. And if the child is able to express that, you may be able to respond verbally and say, "Well, sometimes it's hard to have to stay in the house a whole lot. What do you hate about the house?" Because it might be as something as simple as, I really hate the fact that while I'm here in the house and the blinds are drawn, I don't get to see outside. Who knows what it is? So it may be something you may be able to step right in and remediate. But if it's, I hate it because I want to be outside, I want to be with my friends, I want to go to the park, whatever it is, then I think it's fair to say, well, it's hard for me too. Right now
Mhm.
we have to do things that are hard for everybody. Let's think about how we can make it better. And so that's one thing, is to get the kids involved. Again, depending on the age, 2.5 may be too young, 4.5 isn't. How do we get them involved in making plans and being part of it creatively? to show them that, yeah, we have limitations, but within the limitations, we can still be creative and hopeful. And then also talk about what you can do to be safe. You're washing the hands, sneezing properly, that sort of stuff.
Right.
Again, it gives a little feeling of power that things may be out of control, but there are some things I can do. You say, the little baby, it's not going to matter with. 2.5 is kind of in the middle, but times you get to the older kid. I do a lot of work with preschoolers. So I say an older child, like a 5-year-old, and people look at me like I'm crazy.
Those old
But
kids.
those old kids, those
Yeah.
5-year-olds. But certainly by the time a kid is 4 or 5, you have language and the ability to work with that too. But I would say the key is to sort of find your own inner point of peace and strength, and to respond to what your child's saying as a extreme but normal reaction to the situation that's going on. And also anticipate. We don't know what's going to happen next, so now's the time to get things in line. I don't want to scare people and anticipate things that are worse than they are. But what if you did get sick and you're the primary caregiver? What thoughts can you have now to put things in place that will help you feel calmer, and it will help you when your child says to you, and the older ones will, what happens if you get sick, mommy? Or what happens if you get sick, grandma? So that you have an answer, and you're not, I don't know what's going to happen, because that's just going to make them
Right.
even more
I
scared.
always say whatever happens, we'll handle it somehow. And
Perfectly.
anxiety is only good if it's useful, if it leads, like I always talk about fires. So, useful anxiety means you'll check the batteries in the smoke alarm. Unuseful anxiety means you've done everything you can and you've got a fire plan in place and you've got everything in place and you still can't sleep at night. So, sometimes anxiety leads us to something useful that can help prevent. So, yeah, having a plan in place, I think, is definitely helpful. And we're all doing everything we can. I think obviously Zoom is really helpful.
Yeah.
Scheduling is helpful. Big, big kudos and shout outs to the teachers who are
Oh,
doing their
absolutely.
best. Phone calls, videos from the teachers mean everything. My grandchildren really miss their school. And, homeschooling isn't the answer because they don't go there for academics, they go there for play.
That's
And,
right.
again, luckily in our situation, my daughter has 3 and they keep each other company with, with the good and bad that comes with that. They're a little
Absolutely.
tired of each
Absolutely.
other sometimes, but I've got to say they're handling it masterfully. And we are very fortunate that we have a swing set in the backyard that only these kids have played on. And so, we can go at 11 o'clock, it's outdoor time. And I think a lot about, and we are here in Connecticut, but there are a lot of people in apartments
Yeah.
without
Yeah.
balconies. And I keep thinking of the novel Room, which was made into a movie, but in the novel, it really spells out how this parent, obviously an even more extreme situation, stuck inside a little shed with raising a
Hmm.
child, made a schedule so they could keep their sanity. And they did Olympics running around the bed. And obviously, compared to that, we are so lucky. But pardon me, um, scheduling is helpful. And excuse me, this is early in the morning. So you've really answered my questions, and we have about 5 minutes left. So I want to not repeat things, but move on. Where this question is leading, do you have suggestions for people who literally can't leave their apartments, and for people with only children? Are there things that to help avoid trauma in addition to the great advice you've already given?
Yeah, a couple of things. I think the general rule is, if you can't go outdoors, to the degree that you can, bring outdoors in,
Okay.
which you may be able to do if you have access to the well, probably if you're watching this, you do have access to the computer and that technology, and even to a limited extent by phone. There are great tours of places that you can go online and find out. National parks. I mentioned my 3-year-old granddaughter before. One of the things she's really interested in is sharks. And so a child like her, you could go to aquariums, you could go online and look at movies about sharks, whatever their interests are, you can find that and take them outdoors. Maybe you can find, depending on where you live and places you might normally go to, the museum that you used to go to or the park that you used to spend time with. Maybe there's pictures of that online or something like that. And you can look at that and both go backwards in time to go look at the memories you have and rehearse that, and go forwards in time. There will be a day, we don't know when yet. We're still waiting to see how this all plays out. Isn't it so hard when we just don't know what's going to happen? That kind of approach.
Yeah.
But we do know the day is going to come when we'll be back out in the park, when we'll be back out building a snowman again next winter, or whatever it is that your
Right.
family does, almost like the rituals that you do on an annual basis. Remind people that this is a moment in time. It's a hard moment in time. And especially for a preschooler who lives in the present, it's going to feel like a very long moment in time, but it is a moment in time, and communicate that as well as you can.
I think that's helpful for me to hear as well. And I think, and my daughter and I have spoken about this, one of the hardest things is we don't have an end date.
Yeah,
We think we have an end date.
absolutely.
Oh, school will reopen on blah, blah, blah. And then it might not.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
so, and I think the warmer weather for those of us fortunate enough to be able to go outside will help. Any Any thoughts about screens, which in my speaking career, I call the illusion of connection. Now it is our
Hmm.
only connection. So I think it's unusual times. Any thoughts about screens? And the other question I want to get in, and then I want to ask you about telehealth, is when this is, I don't know if over is the right word, when this
Yeah.
becomes manageable and I believe we'll be able to slowly return to life rather than
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
May 1st, we can all do everything. I think real life will creep back in, which in a way will be better. We
Yeah.
may be able to have dates with other families who've been quarantined for a month and symptom free. I don't know how it will work. But do you think it'll be hard for kids to go back to routine, to go back to school, to go back to seeing their friends again?
I think there's so much
Stockholm
individual.
syndrome. So I'm
Yeah, yeah.
thinking,
There's so much individual variation that's really hard to predict. There are going to be kids that are so eager, it's going to start all over like it never happened. But the kid who's more reticent and shy and maybe had a hard time incorporating themselves into the external situations and groups is probably going to have a hard time again because they've gotten used to the new routine. So
hmm,
that's going to have to be handled situation by situation. But the good news is if your child was well functioning, able to fit in, able to do all the things that they enjoyed, they know how to do it. So it's not learning a new thing, it's learning how to get back something you already had. And we go back again to the issue of language and cognitive skill and how much you can use words and how much you just do it by actions and coaching. Um, Bring them back through the steps that got them success in the first place. I'm not all that concerned about the reentry. I think it's going to be a little bit shaky, and especially since we don't know what we're going to reenter into, how much the world is going to have changed in the time we've been dealing with all this. But
okay.
kids are incredibly resilient, and we're not. And I'm going to come back to what I've said before because I keep saying it. Although we're socially isolated, we're not alone. We're not isolated, and with the communities around us, our families, and the others that are significant parts of our life, we're going to be able to make this happen.
Great, thank you. And I will add as a humorist, because I used to do morning radio, and every boy, are we mining this for the humor in it. I mean, I'm looking
You
for
got
the
to do
comics
that.
and I look for the jokes and I look for Stephen Colbert and Jimmy Fallon and Ellen DeGeneres. We all are trying to help each other, and it's a great leveler.
It is.
And yet I get that, but I'm not sure a 2.5-year-old does. So just love each other through it as best we can. Please tell us about the telehealth initiative and what you and the um, community health center have done in terms of Medicaid in Connecticut and how people can get help.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks. Um, we have a statewide organization that is a primary care setting that gives medical and behavioral health care both. And in the last 10 days or so, really, we've transferred that all over to telehealth, both by phone and by video. Now, of course, there are a limited number of medical visits that have to take place in person. If someone needs a vaccination or something like that, you can't do
Hmm.
that. But we've really moved our whole operations over to remote, such as we're doing right now. And I suspect that most places have. The places that you are used to seeking help will probably be able to give you help. And I would say contact them, call, don't go, call first. but find out how they're doing it and what's going on. In Connecticut, Medicaid has okayed the use of video and phone conferencing to deliver medical and behavioral health care, which is a step forward for us in Connecticut. Other states have had that. Other states still don't have it, but it's well worth calling the places that you would normally call, seek for help. In Connecticut, certainly the 211 line, the info line, is a very good place. And I do not know the resources off the top of my head for the other states that may be listening, but I'm sure your listeners know them. And to stick with your regular resources, and they'll tell you where to go. But the research is really clear that behavioral health care delivered via these media is as effective as care delivered face to face. And I think we're going to see a real sea change in the way care is delivered after this, because so many of us are discovering how to do this. But we'll see what happens. A lot of exciting opportunities down the other line. But what I want to encourage people right now, and I'm glad you said that thing about channeling Mr. Rogers, because that is a quote that helps me keep going. Look for the helpers. Look for the helpers. You know how to take care of your kids, and you are gifted at understanding them, because that's what we do as parents and grandparents. And if something just seems not quite right, talk to your support system around you. You'll get other parents, grandparents, people who will be able to tell you, yeah, every kid I know is doing that. All my friends are telling me that same thing. Yeah, it is a little bit odd, but we're in odd times. But if something does seem really strange, reach out to the places that you have reached out to in the past, and they'll be able to connect you either themselves or through another person to people that are out there. The helpers are there. It may take a little more work to find us, but we are at the same time working to reach out to you, doing things like this opportunity. And thank you for this today to be reaching out to people.
That was my timer saying, Dr. Tim has other things to do.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
I want to value your time because I know you have a lot going on. Before we sign off, is there anything, and thank you, you've been so helpful, and I hope that people will listen to and watch this. Is there a specific resource you'd like to share, your book or the Community Health Center, or just telling people to contact the resources they already know?
Well, thank you for all three of those suggestions. My book is specifically on child sexual abuse. So hopefully none of you are dealing with that in the midst of all these other things. But yeah, that is out there for those people that are interested in that. Those folks that are in Connecticut, among the 135,000 patients or so that we have at the Community Health Center, know that we are there for you and we will be available for you. Other folks, it is far better to continue working with the people you have, because they know you and you know them, and the trust is already developed. Especially for children, it's going to be a little weird seeing a caregiver, whether a medical provider or a behavioral health provider, over the phone or over the video. And starting with a new one is harder than going with someone you already know. But if you have no caregiver and if you are in need, by all means, contact the Community Health Center. Our website is www.chc1.com. And we have a lot of resources on there for parents there and for adults as well, to get some ways to get through this, as well as other folks in the community that we are connected to by links. So that might be a resource for the people in Connecticut.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Timothy Kearney. Thank you for joining us today. Thanks again to Marianne O'Hare for the introduction, and to both of you for all the work that you are doing in the community. I'm Randy Kay, the Power of Kinship. This is the Power of Kinship podcast. And thank you so much for joining us today. We're certainly redefining kinship, or expanding it and finding new ways to do it. And we all look forward to the day where we can do it with a hug and a handshake. Thank you. Stop the recording.
All right.